Curiosity, discipline, exposure. Three words, three things, three identities, if you will, that you probably do not associate with education. More than likely, that's why the standard is low. I'm Augusta C. Foster. This is the Man Talk Monday podcast. Yes, this is another episode in the standard series. Today we talk education. Now, Foster, why are we talking education? Why are we talking education? No, first off, because we're discussing education, let's get to definitions. I'd said in the episode about faith, really wanted to bring it around and go more in depth when we talked about standards. So if you think about a standard, the definition here from Merriam and Webster says it's a widely accepted level of quality, a benchmark used for comparison or a rule established by authority or custom. My favorite word or means of describing a standard is a baseline. Now, a baseline is similar to a standard. It sets the tone for how everything operates in that particular orbit. So when we talk exposure, when we talk experience, when we talk curiosity, when we talk discipline, all of these are concepts that we don't traditionally associate with education. Now, this isn't just as fathers. This is men. This is parents, and more than likely, it's people in general. I like giving the firsthand perspective. So I am someone who their parents did not pull out of school often. My sister can also vouch for this. Most of the time where we missed school, we were either this close to seeing the Lord, meaning we were very, very sick, or it was due to our, how do I put it, activity with, it was sometimes due to our activity with our hands. My sister and I engaged in a lot of physical extracurriculars that were outside of the boundaries of the school system. We got in a lot of fights. We got a lot of scraps. It led to some very interesting moments at home, but consistently, these are the reasons we did not miss school. Rarely were we pulled out for anything else. That being said, when it came to discipline, exposure, curiosity in our home, those things were extremely present. If it's your first time listening or watching, I am a father of five. I've been a married dad, a stepdad, an adoptive dad, a divorced dad, a long distance dad, and now a soon to be remarried dad operating as a co-parenting dad. I normally say I have ran the entire fatherhood gamut, serving in a multitude of capacities. When it comes to exposure, discipline, all of these things, I paid attention to what my parents did and how they worked with us. And now in my own journey in parenting, I've realized that education is very much what my parents said it was. See, I grew up in a household where it was heavy on the history, heavy on the learning, and in the most natural and healthy of ways. My mother was a social worker, activist, uh, community partner, all of these amazing things. You could donate to her foundation. There'll be a link below. And in all of that, she made sure that the things that she carried outside of the home, she also made sure to steward us in those things at home. So we may go volunteer to feed the homeless on a holiday or assist at a shelter, YMCA, YWCA, Beacon House, the city, whether it was Long Beach, Compton, etc., constantly being engaged in the community. Now, that had nothing to do with school, but it set kind of a baseline for our understandings of the importance of community. Beyond that, the other thing that she did was she made sure we had knowledge of self. Now, naturally, Black. So she made sure at home that it wasn't just a thing of us just knowing that we were that, but having an understanding of the history and its importance and not repeating mistakes and avoiding some of the traps that ensnare people who look like us. By the time she married Pops, our father, he was super pro black, blackity black, 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 recycle black dollars, all of that. So, in the things that they did, we had that in our home. We had the curiosity and exposure, the museums, the parks, the books, the games, a rich history of not just Black people and Black history or American history, but a rich history in understanding the Bible, a rich history and even understanding in the other religions, backgrounds, just being able to read those things, not necessarily following them, but getting the exposure and understand this is what they do on this side with other cultures. Also, growing up in Los Angeles, being fully immersed into Mexican or Salvadorian, Cuban, West African cultures from coworkers, friends, and classmates. This kind of exposure was education. So this is what I saw firsthand growing up. So naturally, these are things that I've wanted to teach my children. This past year, I wanted to take my older kids somewhere where they hadn't experienced, but where they would get an opportunity to kind of see one of the seven wonders of the world. So, because at the moment they're currently passportless, what I did was snatch them up and flew them into Phoenix, Arizona to go see the Grand Canyon, which isn't really in Phoenix, but we had to go into Phoenix. So, along with that, we also went and saw one of America's wonders, the Mall of America. Now, this may seem small, but it was multi-tiered in what it was. So now what's happened is I've piqued their curiosity on travel. I've exposed them getting on a plane, flying not necessarily in coach, but in first class, business class seats. Extremely blessed to be able to do that, by the way. But then also letting them go to these places and ask open-ended questions. Like that is part of this journey of parenting where you are setting the standard of learning, like you're creating the environment that values that curiosity. I really think about it when you were growing up, for you, the listener, the watcher, were you in that kind of environment? I speak a lot of times on my firsthand experience of my introduction to not education, but certain structures in place around education. You'll hear me 1,000 times talk about the school to prison pipeline, specifically someone coming born and raised in Los Angeles, California, throughout San Pedro, Compton, Long Beach, LA Unified School District, to be exact, but how they were able to pinpoint a young man between the second, fifth, sixth grade and identify that if he would go from someone who just had a identification number associated with the school district to get lunches and tickets and the library card to somebody who would end up with a number on their chest. These are just facts. So I say that to say my parents understood those things of exposure, that amount of curiosity, that environment they created. The teachers, I had the best teacher ever, Sharon Gaddis Wheeler, God rest her soul, second and third grade. She created and cultivated an environment that thrived in curiosity, us asking open-ended questions. We weren't punished. In her opinion, there were no stupid questions because she understood we're 9, 10 years old. We're naturally inquisitive. We want to know things. And she was there to answer them. But I had that exact same thing in the home. So my exposure, a healthy environment for curiosity, being able to ask, even non-traditional education. I mean, my father was longshoreman, but he primarily was a tradesman, locksmith, electrician, plumber. I mean, while other kids may have been out doing whatever they were doing during the summer, I wasn't just mowing lawn. I was knocking down walls and framing doors, working on roofs, climbing under the house, dealing with roofing and masonry issues, which was sucked in the moment. But let me tell you, in hindsight, extremely rewarding work, which is why I appreciate all the brothers and sisters who work in the trades. But even that, a non-traditional route. See, I think in that itself, we confuse education and learning. I was learning from my father, was learning literally the tricks of the trade. I wasn't just learning math. I mean, I was picking it up in the measurements, knowing how to look at a measuring tape, measure out the exact measurement, not rounding up to a half or a quarter, being all right, that was a 16. All right, this weighed how much weight? And not knowing in that moment that it was math, but looking back going, man, learned a lot of math with the old man, knocking down walls, framing doors, putting in windows, installing plumbing, painting, color codes, all of these different things. We're learning, but also education. See, there's so much that we've been told because for a lot of us, the standard you may have had growing up didn't encourage these things. And I think a lot of us were somewhat cheated by some of our parents. And they did the best that they could, but some, they didn't create an environment for curiosity. They didn't expose us to things. They only considered education is what you got in the school, which is why so many of us, to a certain extent, failed. See, when you limit the education to what a teacher can give you, not only are you limiting the child, but you're hamstringing the teacher. I've watched so many kids who don't get that environment at home. The parents know it. The parents aren't up on homework. They're not reading. And that'll go into my next point. But all of these things aren't occurring at home. The reason they're not occurring at home is a repetition of failure or a failure to ever establish a standard. So now I'm watching parents who say that they take pride in education and that their kids read so well and that their kids excel in math, but the outcomes aren't showing that. The baseline they have at home, it's not nurtured, it's not poured into, so you get the results. Now, sure, you could say 2 plus 2 is 4, but so is 3 plus 1, and so is 4 plus 0. There are multiple ways to get there, to get that education, to get that learning, to get that exposure, to gain the knowledge, either through experience, like the work with my dad in the summers. When we come down to that last point, if you don't cultivate the exposure, if you don't encourage curiosity, and I think of the exposure, some people, I don't have the money to do that. Museums are free, libraries are free. I then think of the curiosity, how many kids that's been quelled because you ask too many questions. Oh, I don't want to hear all of that. So instead of creating an environment where curiosity reigns and it's open-ended questions, your kid could ask you anything, you could have a real genuine conversation on it, instead of placing in a position where they get exposure to these different books and colors and lives. It's all limited. And it's repeated because you probably grew up in a household where that too was the standard. We're coming up in graduation season. And outside of exposure and curiosity, the biggest thing that I see that lacks, even in my own children at times, and I blame myself because it's me to blame, is discipline. I mean, think about it like this. I just told you at the beginning, at the top of this, less than 15 minutes ago, my sister and I spent time out of school, mostly for getting busy with our hands when we shouldn't have been. How do you think that went at home for us? Not great. But I also think about how many times I made those mistakes, even though it was repeated several times, but really being like, I don't want to do this again. See, the standard in our home was greater than the standard at school because we had the curiosity, because we had the exposure. So then the question would come from our parents of, if you have this, if you have this, if you know this, why are you doing this as a detriment? You're only hurting yourself. So it makes you ask the question, what is the standard in your home? Now, we had ours and the times were different. It was the 90s, but still, we knew right from wrong. We knew to study. We knew to read, but we also had an active parent and parents who poured into us. So the question I have to you is, what is the standard in your home for education? You may not be able to expose your kid to all of these different things or give them different learning tools. You may not be able to have the time to necessarily cultivate an environment that calls for them to be curious, that calls for them to ask questions, that calls for them to be inquisitive. You may not have that time, but now ask that question. What is your standard? What is your time management to where you implement discipline? I see so many people who folks say, oh, they fell through the cracks. And I recognize that some people don't fall through the cracks, that they have a parent who's established a foundation with cracks. parent doesn't make the time, the parent doesn't pour into the child. And again, we could talk curiosity and exposure, but it comes down to the thing that one of my great uncles used to say, which is want to. What is the standard that you want to establish for your kid? What is the standard for discipline? Right now is currently prom season. There will be discussions that go on, which I'll have in different later in time, specifically from a cultural aspect, where they call hashtag Black Prom. You're going to see all of these young Black kids who have these elegant and immaculate signature style proms. It's going to be amazing. And that may be the height for a lot of those kids. Because their point will be, I graduated from high school, even if it was by the skin of my teeth, but the big celebration was my prom. I had an awesome party. And these are kids who are barely graduating. And it's not to say don't celebrate your kids' victories. It's to say, what kind of victories are we celebrating? What are we really telling our kids where a Christmas season, which is going to be fast upon us in the blink of an eye, and you have kids who were finishing the semester with D's and F's, but your standard has always said you're okay with that. So then they still get rewarded. Your standard says, I don't necessarily mind if you don't turn in homework or complete assignments. So the outcome is someone who didn't complete homework or finish assignments. See, this isn't an episode about what to do with your kids, really. How to discipline them, how to get them in line. No. This is an episode that asks you, quite honestly, the hell standard are you setting for education? Is your kid in summer school because they actually can't learn? Or is your kid in summer school because you haven't found the time to do anything except make an excuse? Does your kid have trouble reading because they're actually deficient and they may have a legitimate learning disability, which needs to be reviewed, which needs to be nurtured, which needs to be given time? Or is it because you don't have a standard of discipline in your home that says when they get in, they need to complete these tasks? The standard for education has zero to do with a teacher and 100% to do with you as the parent. Because no matter what happens in the school, every teacher, every administrator, every counselor, every college professor will tell you that kid is only with them in a limited amount of time. And as I've seen in my own life, is had some real cool teachers, great stories, but the most learning I gained in my life was firsthand experience on roofs and on jobs with my father when it came to being exposed and doing learning that wasn't necessarily traditional. The most education I received was at home, sitting down, reading, seeing my mother walk us not just through homework, but randomly throwing us book reports to where we found out that we were passionate as readers. What is your standard for education for your children? Are you limiting it to what the teacher does? Are you following through with homework? Are you serving as your child's advocate when they're struggling? Are you being there as their cheerleader when they're successful? I challenge you. Find out what the standard is for your kids' education. And if you see that they're lacking, if you see that they're not going forward, if you see that they're not achieving the way that they should, you shouldn't question your kid on why they're not exceeding or succeeding. You should question yourself on what standard, what guideline that you put in place. As always, I greatly appreciate your time. Tap in. Thank you for following. Thank you. Like, share, all of that. So Gus C. Foster, Man Talk Monday. Peace. Love y'all. I'm out.